If you're at that fork in the road, look to your values, and your values should help guide you in terms of the right decision. And if they don't, the values are not alive, they're not in the halls, and maybe they are the wrong ones.
Hi pals, welcome to The People Are the Plan by Smart Savvy & Associates. Each episode, we talk about how to grow leaders that inspire, build teams that thrive, and create work cultures that rock. Every episode is like having a cup of coffee with some of the smartest people on the planet. I'm your host, Leah, and I'm here to learn right along with you. Are you ready? Let's go. Today, we're talking with Erica Keswin. Erica is an expert in the business of working human. Erica is a workplace strategist who has worked for the past 20 years with some of the most iconic brands in the world as a consultant, speaker, author, and professional dot connector. Today, we're chatting with her about her brand new best-selling book, Bring Your Human to Work, 10 surefire ways to design a workplace that's good for people, great for business, and just might change the world. Welcome to the People Are the Plan podcast, Erica. We're so thrilled to have you.
Thank you so much for the invitation.
Oh man. So to kick things off, normally I have a coffee with me, and I was wondering if you have a beverage with you over there.
Well, yeah. I do. I am, yes. And maybe it'll end up coming up in our conversation, sure. But it was my beverage at Starbucks, which is a grande extra hot soy latte that inspired the name of the book. So that's what I'm drinking at the moment.
Oh, excellent. Okay. In your book, you talk about the impacts of millennials in the current workplace. And so in honor of that, here I am right now. I'm cracking a tasty millennial nectar, also known as a grapefruit liqueur.
Oh, yum. All right. I'll have to try that.
Yeah, totally. There's quite a few internet jokes about the light flavoring that goes into the sparkling water. But it's a hit. And yeah, so in the book, you really, kick off very positive sentiments and positive changes of how millennials are influencing work culture. In honor of that, I printed also a tweet that says, it's by Sarah Valentine, one of my favorite memes about millennials. And it says, everyone hates millennials until it's time to convert a PDF into a Word document.
I know. I saw that recently. I cracked up because I get I get a millennial that works for me to help me with my Instagram story, so I can relate to that.
Excellent, totally. Great. Well, we're rolling, and today we're going to talk about creating winning workplace cultures and what makes us successful leaders. I was wondering though if we could first connect on culture and how you define it. You have a really cool definition of culture for organizations in the book, and would love to kind of help align everybody on what your definition of culture is.
Sure. So to me, culture refers to how it feels to interact with a company. And that could be as an employee, it could be as a consumer, a business partner, a vendor. I also think about it as a company's vibe or personality. And then finally, I often think about it and talk about it as culture is what happens when the boss isn't looking. You can write everything down and tell people the mission and the values. Yeah. But what really, the culture really is what happens when, no one who's in charge is around.
Right. Right. Yeah. The boss is away. Yeah. Super cool. So with that said, what does it mean, this concept of bringing your human to work?
So if I had to boil it down to one idea, it's about what I call honoring relationships. And that's honoring relationships with your colleagues at work. It could be with your clients or customers. And it's also honoring that relationship with yourself. Because, excuse the pun, but left to our own devices, we're often these days in this age of the digital revolution, not connecting. And so honoring relationships is about being more intentional about how, when, where, we connect.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Oh, that is a really important thing to keep in mind. Yeah, because you're right. We're inundated with notifications and, productivity apps and even things we think are helping connect. They can be hindrances. That's a good point. And so with that, why does it matter to bring our human to work?
Well, it's interesting. Sometimes I've been working in the human capital field for so long, and this people used to always, and many still do, think about this stuff as the soft stuff, but in many ways,
Right.
the soft stuff is the hard stuff. And so why is this important? The book and the work that I do shares the science and stories of why this is important. And there's a lot of data that's why this matters.
Mm-hmm.
And so the subtitle of the book, as you mentioned, is, why does this matter? It's good for people, great for business, and it's also good for the world. So, I can give a few examples here.
Sure.
First, let's talk about why is it good for us as people.
Mm-hmm.
The Surgeon General recently came out with a study that found that the biggest health risk facing our country is not smoking secondhand smoke, even sitting was thrown around. It's isolation and loneliness. And loneliness actually equates, interestingly, in terms of our health, to having 15 cigarettes a day. So we're not connecting, and we spend so much of our time at work. So we need to think about the impact on us, as human beings. From a workplace perspective, many of your listeners may have seen or read the Gallup study that found that having a best friend, when you have a best friend at work, it means that you're typically more engaged, happier at work, less likely for turnover. And I was curious with that study, and well, what does that mean, have a best friend at work in this day and age? And one of the key parts of that question looks at, do you spend time at work talking to people about non-work related things? And if you are not taking time to connect with people at work, you're probably not. And so it has real bottom line implications, because when you do have that best friend at work, you are 7 times more engaged. So why does it matter? Because there are bottom line implications for us as people, and also for our companies.
Oh, that's fascinating. I think when you're talking about prioritizing relationships, it's truly also through your work forging these stronger relationships together as like a shared purpose. As you have good friends, you're doing it together, right? That's super cool.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Wow. Learning a ton already. This is so great. We so appreciate all you sharing all these learnings. Something I noticed on your site is you have a great quiz on figuring out whether or not we're bringing our best human selves to work. Because if we aren't, who are we bringing? So that's
right.
Neat tool. And in your experience, how well are we at self-identifying? How to apply these kinds of principles?
I think we have a long way to go, and it's partly about just being aware of the impact and the reason why this is important to motivate us to do it better. Mm-hmm. And, the quiz gives us benchmarking information and gives us a starting point. But I'm out in LA right now, and I just came from a great session with a consulting firm, and they were talking about, there's a lot of traffic in LA, as we know,
right.
and many people, many millennials, and really all of us want flexibility in how we work, which is an important aspect of a human culture. Yet, what the people were saying at this session is that they will be at a client site, and then they'll come into the office one day and they don't bump into any of the people that they're working with, and it bums them out. Right. So then the next week they're less likely to motivate to drive that extra hour if they're not going to bump into people. So I talked to them about the idea of being strategic and intentional and coordinating with the people on your team so that at least you all come into the office on the same day, because those connections are linked to higher productivity, innovation, right. All of the ideas that you can get when you're actually bumping into somebody in person, right. Let alone it's just you're less lonely when you're with the people that you work with.
Yeah, no, that's a really important reminder as you start to think of kind of working remotely and the things that technology, those connections it does enable, is that it then potentially takes away the opportunity to have those in-between moments connecting.
Right, exactly.
That's
although
really,
it's funny,
yeah.
I was going to say it's funny, although maybe not funny. I spoke with a CEO once who shared with me that there were 9 people in his company on a conference call, and he found out after the fact that all 9 people had called into the call from the same building.
Oh,
So in other words, everybody was like an elevator bank or a few cubicles away from each other. And I asked myself in that moment, I mean, one, I said, wow, that's interesting. And then kind of depressing. And then it was about, well, what would make someone decide to forego the opportunity to connect face to face with their colleagues? And then it came back to, left to our own devices, we're not connecting. So we have to share the data, and we have to be intentional, or sadly, it often won't happen.
Wow, that's fascinating. That's a really important point for sure.
Hi, Happy New Year, everyone. I'm Catherine Ducharme, and I'm a director at Smart Savvy Academy.
And I'm Peter Reek. I'm the CEO and founder of Smart Savvy.
So we are well into 2019, mid-January. How are your New Year's goals going?
I am uncharacteristically on track with my goals this year. I've typically been a person who sets a lot of resolutions and goals, and around about this time have disappointed myself. But this year, I'm moving in the right direction. So
what's changed for you?
I have been working with a coach on an ongoing basis for the last year, and I'm more in a rhythm of following through on goals and objectives that I set for myself.
So tell me a little bit more about that. How does a coach help you stay on track?
My coach asks me questions that are geared to hold myself accountable, not to accountable to them, but being accountable to myself. And as you get in the rhythm and practice of that, it becomes quite rewarding.
Wow. So if you get to the end of the year, having accomplished your goals, what will have changed for you?
Well, on a personal front, I will be healthier, and I will be focusing more on the relationships that matter most to me. And on a business front, we'll be working closer towards our 5-year plan.
That's great. That's pretty significant changes.
It is. And what about you? How's your year looking?
Well, I also have a coach, thanks to Smart Savvy, and the future's looking bright. What I'm working with my coach on is, how to work better with you.
Better with me. I'll take that as that there's a strong desire there for that to happen, and I look forward to working with you for a long time.
So do I, Peter. So, I hope everybody reaches their goals for 2019. And if you're interested in getting a coach or becoming certified in coaching, you can email us at hello@smartsavvy.academy.
Thanks for listening. Back to you, Leah.
Okay, so that said, we're talking current context. You've been able to define what it is and why it's important. Are there, a few key points, or a few a top 3 or top 5 or all 10 of your surefire ways to be creating this more human workplace?
Well, what I say to people is that, there are 10 ways, 10 chapters in the book, and they're in no particular order. And people can pick and choose from a menu of options of what is interesting to them, what their employees are asking for, where they want to start, except for one chapter. Chapter 1 is first for a reason.
Okay.
And, that to me is the most important thing. And chapter 1 is called Be Real, How to Speak in an Authentic Voice. And chapter 1 is about knowing your values. And many companies have a set of values, but in most or many companies, they are platitudes on a wall. And the idea is, how do we get them off the walls and into the halls? And, millennials and Gen Z are driving a lot of this, that they want to work for a company that's connected to something greater than themselves, that has meaning and purpose.
Right.
And so companies that focus on chapter 1 and articulating those values and empowering their employees to live them will have a much better shot at the rest of the 10 chapters and aligning the rest of them to those values.
Oh, that's really interesting, talking about making the values a real, other than platitudes, a real thing. And so what would be some of your tips for folks? I mean, knowing that is your your most important point, the biggest headline you want to drive home with folks and the most key learning, what would be some tips around that to even create values in the first place? I know that's a whole component. And then the next step of demonstrating that they're real things and making them show as actions.
Yeah. So first I would say one of the mistakes a lot of companies make is that they have too many values, 10, 12, 14 values. And the problem with that is that nobody, who can remember 10, 12, or 14 things? And these values are important. You want people to be able to remember them. So step number one is try to narrow them down. My sweet spot on the values is 4 to 6. I think that it's enough to have variety and to focus on a couple different things, but it's not too many that people don't remember them. The litmus test that I use is called the fork in the road. Okay. And what I mean by that is that if you and your company are at a fork in the road and you're trying to decide, should I hire this person? Should I fire this person who might be bringing in revenues, but is, not a great fit for our culture? Should I do this deal? Should I launch this product? A variety of different strategic issues. Yeah. If you're at that fork in the road, look to your values, and your values should help guide you in terms of the right decision. And if they don't, the values are not alive, they're not in the halls, and maybe they are the wrong ones.
Right. Oh, that's an excellent point. Of course, if there's just too many to remember, how on earth can you embody them and be inspired to act in their spirit if you're like, what was number, 14.A? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So once you've narrowed them down and decide that they work in your culture, they work in your company. Yeah. And then I would add a couple other things. Sure. The next is, how do you get them alive? You need to collect examples of people living them and share them with everybody in the company. So what does it look like when someone is acting collaboratively, or, Lyft is in the book and they have a value called uplift others and create fearlessly. What does that look like? What are examples? And you can talk about, some companies talk about those examples at an all hands meeting. They might ask managers for recommendations and examples of people who would live them. And then they recognize a couple of people every month. Or there's companies that even leverage technology to do this. So I just wrote an article the other day about the company Away Luggage, and they have a Slack channel called Team Love, where they ask all of their employees to put on this Slack channel examples of people exhibiting those values and being able to thank them for doing it. So it creates this repository of great examples and great stories of how do you know the value when you see it, which is helpful when you have people that maybe aren't performing well. You can point them to that. You have people who are new and don't know how things work in your company. So you can do it face to face, you can do it via technology, but it's just important to do it. And then once you've captured these stories, share them with everybody who will listen. Yeah. Clients, customers, employees, the world.
Oh, that's incredible. I think you raise a really important point too, of taking an interaction or some kind of action that may have been peer-to-peer or kind of one provider to a customer, or, one-to-one kind of interaction, but, amplifying that within the organization and beyond to make sure it's visible, and it also gets a nice kudos and some appreciation.
Right. Exactly.
Very
you can link them. Yeah. The last chapter in the book, we talked about the first chapter. If we skip to the last chapter is called Say Thanks. And the idea of gratitude in the workplace, saying thank you, recognition, to recognize people for living these values is a great way to instill them.
Yeah. Oh, that's wonderful. So in that, you've mentioned Away as well as Lyft as some great examples of organizations who are creating a more human culture. Are there any others that you've encountered that also maybe embody it in a different sense?
Yeah. I would say one of my favorite human companies is JetBlue. And what's interesting about JetBlue, they have 5 values, which is right in my sweet spot of 4 to 6.
Yeah.
But good news for all of us frequent flyers out there is that not only do they have 5 values, but they are in a very specific order. So fun is a value at JetBlue, but it's number 5, and safety is number 1, which again is good for us as we want safety to be
totally. Yeah.
So I think that they do a really, really great job. And, other companies, there's small companies, there's big companies. There's one very fun, funky company in there that many of your listeners may not have heard of called Jellyvision, which is in Chicago. And they make filling out online benefits fun and interesting, which anybody can do that, gets my vote.
Yeah.
And
it kind of sounds like an oxymoron at first. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And so they have a really interesting, human policy called the graceful leave policy. And what they say is that, it's hard to get a job at Jellyvision. They spend a lot of time interviewing people, and, once you're there, they hope to keep you. But people move on, they go back to school, they get new jobs. And what they say is, we want to do everything we can in our power to have you leave gracefully. So what does that mean? That means everything from, they say to your people, if you give us notice that you're looking, which gives us time to recruit somebody else, we will continue to put you on projects. We will write you a recommendation. We might even help you find a new job. And it's like if you're human to us, we'll be human to you.
Wow. That's very powerful to think of, someone extending that care beyond their time with them. It's amazing.
Right.
So maybe getting even a little more tactical, talking about companies that are embodying these values that you've set out and this kind of principle. What's one thing we could do as individuals, and we could start right now after listening to this or after our lunch break or tomorrow, to ensure we're bringing our human to work as individuals?
Right. So one of the, I would venture to guess that every single person listening to this podcast has at least a couple meetings a week, if not a couple meetings every day.
Yeah.
And meetings are a phenomenal opportunity to bring our human to work and to connect and reap all those benefits of oxytocin and increased productivity and innovation, all the things that we know we get from connection. It can, what better place than in a meeting when we're all coming together, presumably to connect. However, in most meetings, there's not a lot of thought that goes into who should be at the meeting or what the agenda is at the meeting or what the protocols about technology are. So you're in a meeting and everybody's texting under the table and hurting relationships, and it typically does not go well.
Right. So
in that chapter, I break it down into purpose, presence, and protocol. So think about the purpose. If you're the one calling the meeting, does this meeting have a purpose? Or maybe we don't need to have this meeting.
Right.
My guess is if you did that, if you assessed the purpose for all of your meetings, you would probably, just by going through that exercise, you probably would reduce them by 20%.
Yeah, good point. Yeah.
Number 2, what could we all do tomorrow is that when we go to a meeting, we can not only be physically present, we could be mentally or psychologically present, and we can convince everybody else to do the same. Because what we find is that when you don't have your technology sitting in front of you in meetings, your productivity will go up, your meetings will be shorter, and the depth and the substance increases as well. So that would be my hope, because I think all of us sit in probably way too many meetings.
Totally.
So when we are in them, get the benefits of those connections.
Totally. And to your point, it's more effective if you have that structured time together to actually come together and get the things done you want to get done.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's not just talking around about what we want to do. It's like, do the things you want to do. Oh, that's brilliant. So you mentioned earlier when we first connected about how somehow your Starbucks order your drink order has inspired the title of the book. Do you mind sharing a bit more about how that came to be?
Yeah, sure. So I live on the Upper West Side in Manhattan, and I've always been a big Starbucks fan. And I got to know my local barista on 81st and Broadway, and her name is Ashley Peterson, and she would have my grande extra hot soy latte waiting for me.
Oh, awesome.
And over time, she got to know my kids because I would pass the Starbucks on my way to walking the kids to school. So a couple of years ago, my daughter Caroline became obsessed with Starbucks pumpkin scones.
Oh, okay.
And if you or any of your listeners know anything about the Starbucks pumpkin phenomenon, the pumpkin spice lattes, the pumpkin scones, they are seasonal items at Starbucks. And so come mid-November, you can't find one anywhere. So Ashley told my daughter that, in a couple of weeks, there would be no more pumpkin scones. And finally that day came, and we stopped by the Starbucks. I got my coffee, but there was nothing to get for Caroline. And the next thing I know, I hear my name being called down the street in Manhattan. And I turn around and I see Ashley running down Broadway, which was quite a scene or a sight at 7:30 in the morning in Manhattan. Yeah. And she's out of breath, Erica. And I thought that maybe I had left my wallet at Starbucks because this was before I was using the app to order my coffee.
Totally, yeah.
And she catches up to us and she says, Caroline, I know you're so bummed that today's our first day without the pumpkin scones, but now that it's November, it's holiday time at Starbucks, and here's a piece of gingerbread that you might like. And so not only does my daughter end up with a big smile on her face, but for me, working as a workplace strategist, helping companies improve performance through people, this was this light bulb moment for me. Here was a person I had known for years, was always behind the counter. She'd gotten out from behind the counter, literally chased me down the street, connected on a very human level. And I thought to myself, well, one, in that moment, the idea and the title for the book, Bring Your Human to Work, came to me because I thought that is exactly what she was doing. But then I also thought, if Starbucks or any company could bottle what she did, they could crack the code on any business. And so, as Starbucks now tries to figure this out as it relates to ordering on the app, and really every company needs to figure out in this age of technology, where do we find that human connection?
That's so powerful. Thank you so much for walking us through the origin story too. What a lightning strike of a moment. That's really helpful. And we just so appreciate your time in sharing all of this with us.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Wonderful.
I'm going to say, I'm excited for people to reach out. They can find me on my website, ericakeswin.com. Would love for people to take the quiz. I just launched a monthly Human Headlines newsletter where I'm highlighting all kinds of leaders, in companies big and small, who are bringing their human to work. So if people hear of somebody or hear of a company that's doing something interesting as it relates to the 10 chapters, I'm always on the lookout for both the science and stories of being human at work. So would love to hear from everybody.
Oh, wonderful. Wonderful. Well, thank you again for your time sharing. And man, I've definitely learned so much over my fizzy millennial nectar, grapefruit, sparkling water with you. And once again, to our pals listening in on the pod, Erica's most recent book is called Bring Your Human to Work, 10 Surefire Ways to Design a Workplace That's Good for People, Great for Business, and Just Might Change the World. Thank you again for the talk, and we just so appreciate everything.
Great. Well, it was really nice to get to know you, and thanks again for having me.
Excellent. Well, take care and enjoy the rest of your day, pal.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.